Resident Evil, a franchise still regarded as a legend in video games for its intense gameplay, simple fun, and terrifying atmosphere. The Capcom series has scared the pants off of gamers for decades, whether it's through an ambush of hellhounds or killing the player in some really vicious ways. With a brand like Resident Evil, one would think this horror series could expand upon its world, opening up new possibilities to bring the series into various genres and tell all different kinds of stories. Alas, that has not really been the case. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays and click on the links in the description to vote on upcoming content. The series has tried doing some spin-offs before, you see. The most successful of these was Revelations, but the sequel didn't really live up to expectations. Operation Raccoon City had an okay feature, but the rest of the experience was also awful. Then you got Resident Evil Survivor, which tried bringing the franchise to the light gun shooter genre, and well, there's not a lot of room for growth there. However, this spin-off approach does not work when the gameplay is slow, predictable, and very, very boring. So, despite all of the gripes we've had with all of the aforementioned games, and the likes of Resident Evil 5 and 6, there is one game that stands out as the absolute worst: Umbrella Corps.
Umbrella Corps.
Released in the summer of 2016, Umbrella Corps was a competitive multiplayer shooter that allowed gamers to play as and customize their very own Umbrella mercenary. While it aimed to compete with the likes of Overwatch and other esports titles, give that a second to gestate, Umbrella Corps quickly became a resounding failure. It was such a travesty that we placed it at the top spot in our worst games of 2016 list, actually. Well, strap yourselves in, because we're going to talk some more about it, and it's going to get messy. Basically not hard to figure out how to play a typical Resident Evil game. As the formula goes, you explore a spooky environment, you stock up on supplies and weapons, and shoot anything that moves. Well, almost anything, and you gotta conserve your ammo. It's a simple formula, yeah, but it's worked so many times in the franchise's earlier years. It kept us players on our toes, demanding that we constantly manage our inventory space and decide when to use certain items or weapons. While some moments kicked our adrenaline into high gear, there was generally an even pacing that helped us relax once the terror was over.
Chainsaw.
So, Umbrella Corps, while admittedly being in a different genre, totally fails to play like a Resident Evil game. Now, we're not just saying this because of the heavy focus on multiplayer. You see, instead of having a flow between frantic gunplay and suspenseful exploration, Umbrella Corps needs to feed the player non-stop action. However, this makes the game incredibly difficult to follow, whether you're a player or even a spectator. Players are constantly having to redirect their line of fire between enemy players and zombies. Plus, with the map sizes being so compact and claustrophobic, there's basically no time to rest, so forget strategy. And for those of you who tried playing this with a friend, we're guessing that there were many times where neither of you could hear each other over the gunfire, let alone think straight. As we've witnessed with tons of Resident Evil games in the past, there are many times when the series has been a little less scary and a little more action-packed. Now, we're not saying that a change in style is always a bad thing, but in Resident Evil's case, it's almost always been a bad thing. Resident Evil 5 and 6 have been lauded for how they basically abandoned the elements of survival horror in favor of more combat. However, at least those two games had decent gameplay. I mean, 5 did. Bullets registered, they weren't incredibly buggy, and the games provided some serviceable single-player experiences.
Remember, we're a team. Whatever happens, we stick together.
Umbrella Corps, on the other hand, is littered with technical flaws too. From its inconsistent bullet registration to unbalanced gameplay to poor level design to clunky controls to basically everything. And just when you think the single player might hold some redeeming qualities, you are quickly reminded to let go of that hope. Because the single player has absolutely nothing to do with Resident Evil's story because the whole thing is just a glorified survive the horde mode. What is this crap? There's no reason that Resident Evil, a primarily single-player linear horror series, needed to be part of the esports scene.
Brutal. No enemies in sight. Oh, I take that back. Intense point-blank firefight. Alpha Team made the smart move and took cover.
When you look back at the best Resident Evil games, you'll find that they all share common elements with each other. They kept the gameplay intense, and they held moments that scared the crap out of the player, forcing them to keep the lights on for every playthrough. They also had a certain cheesy tone to their storytelling and writing that, at times, made us cringe and laugh, but added to the charm. So, in conclusion, how could any of that work in multiplayer? Well, I guess it doesn't.
Now, shotgun's the perfect weapon for that range, but he's got a badly damaged jammer right there.
Well, that's another Alpha Team member down. Can they turn the tables?
Had Umbrella Corps become a cooperative shooter rather than a competitive one, we could have seen something like Left 4 Dead 2 with Leon, Chris and Claire, Jill Valentine, and Albert Wesker as one team. Well, maybe not with Wesker. Then again, maybe Resident Evil simply isn't built for a multiplayer experience. And until the franchise proves us wrong with another title that's worse, we have no choice but to name Umbrella Corps the worst Resident Evil game of all time.
Denied! You are dead!
Crazy! That's what they talk about when they talk about competitive shooters, Matt.
Thanks for watching Mojo Plays. Be sure to subscribe and click on the link in the description below to check out our suggestion page and vote on what content you'd like to see us cover next.